All right. So this session last week that we had commenced was about one of the most prevalent problems that we have in this world today and in these times that we live in. Essentially, I had mentioned about the problem itself, how it manifests, but the more important thing for us is that the root cause from a spiritual standpoint is related to one single chakra, which is the Agya chakra in the region of the forehead here. And that's the most complicated for human beings. Unfortunately, as we have evolved as a civilization, our lives have gotten more complicated. But more than our lives, our disposition, our psyche, our thinking, the whole thing has become extremely complex. And to some extent, that's understandable because the if you look at the advancement and the modernization that has happened in the last, say, 70, 80 years, that's just mind boggling and path breaking technological advancements. Also, from a personality standpoint, there are so many good things, right? We have matured as a civilization. We now know, for instance, racism is bad or slavery is bad. And we know that we have to respect and be connected in this world and all of that. So there are many good things that have happened. We have matured. But the cost of moving so fast, making so many advancements, has obviously had a downside in that we have overused our mental faculties, our emotional faculties, down to a point where we are now struggling with the whole chatter of criticism, of disagreements, of not being able to live with each other, and so on. So that's the negative side of things. And unfortunately, as nature would have it, this is the human civilization is a test of the survival of the fittest. So not everybody is same. Some people evolve faster. They know the positives and negatives, and they know that they have to focus on the positives, and then they try to work on the negatives. They introspect and so on. But not everybody is like that. There is a percentage of the population that unfortunately is negative, either willingly or unwillingly, becomes extremely negative in their head. And so either way we look at it, that's a problem that we've got to solve. And that is the core coverage as far as this topic is concerned. And so what we will be doing is we will be looking at the root cause of this big problem that we have. Yeah, I'll just do a brief recap of what we did last week. And of course, we will have a couple of meditation sessions. I'll do the recap first, then we'll have a meditation, then I'll go to the today's session contents, and then we'll finish off with another meditation. So that's how we work in this session. We also try to focus on specific techniques that might help us take it back offline in future sessions at home and try to work on this problem. So to summarize what we had gone over next week, I'm just going to move past this a little bit. I had indicated that let's try and understand the problem, and the problem is could be put into three phases, if you will. The first is moment there is some sort of a conflict, and conflict as in something doesn't agree, something doesn't gel well, something doesn't seem right. That's the first semblance or the first appearance of a conflict in our heads, in our minds, if you will. Then at that stage we can just choose to not do much about it and then just carry on. So that's even okay. And then the next stage it moves to is the conflict we realize is not in agreement with us. So that's when the analysis starts within us, and we say, okay, I don't agree with this, or somehow I don't like this. All those are forms of disagreement, right? Or this doesn't do it for me, and so on and so forth. And then even at that stage, a person might say, that's okay, I'll just move on, I'll accept it and move on, and that's still fine. The problem happens when we move further and we say, we take some action upon that to strengthen that feeling of disagreement or hate or dislike, and then it turns and sits within us, and then it turns into many of those negative actions. And sometimes it can stay with us for months or years. And this is not just about people who willfully will try to develop some sort of negativity within them, right? It is also about extremely, I would say, innocent people harmless, but still caught up in this whole hate thing, disagreement, dislike thing, even out of even if they did not desire it and they do not know what to do, right? So all kinds of situations and people are included. So in the third stage, we are in that position where we realize we have been caught up. There is strong resentment or hatred or dislike or anger, or even further, we'd like to venge or we'd like to see somebody pay for it, and so on and so forth, right? In the extreme situation, we resort to violence, and these days physical violence is not as common as emotional violence, which is things like saying hurtful things, writing those bad emails, trolling on social media. All those are forms of violence. We've got to recognize that, right? So that's the third stage. So that in essence is the whole problem. And the way I have compartmentalized this is that spiritually, this situation is related to a blocked Agya Chakra, as I said. And the Agya Chakra itself in this spiritual subtle system has got two important components, which when becomes excessive can really cause a problem. One is the ego, which is a sense of highness, and the other one is the sense of conditionings or rigidity or firmness, inflexibility within us, which is the superego. And these sort of balloons inflate within us, and then they cause a blockage over here in this area. And this blockage is particularly important or consequential in for people who meditate, because the Kundalini energy in Sahaj form of meditation rises through the central channel, which is located in the spine. And then when it reaches this point over here, if it encounters this blockage, these two big balloons of ego and superego, which have developed as a consequence of this conflict and disagreement and everything, it can find it difficult to pass through. Of course, the job of the Kundalini energy is also, while passing through, to suck in these two. So they sort of help each other. But nevertheless, if it is too strong, then we can find that the Kundalini does not rise. And what happens when the Kundalini does not pass this chakra and move on to the seventh? Simple, we cannot get into that higher state of meditation, which is realized only in the seventh chakra or the Sahasrara. Right? That's the most immediate consequence. As a result, we cannot find peace, we cannot find a solution, we cannot rise above all these problems. And we continue to grow worse and worse at this sixth chakra, and then we find it hard to focus, and soon we lose sort of control over ourselves. So those are all the problems. So that is the gist of this particular problem. And I also mentioned last week that this results or manifests in different ways. We have problems with people. Then we have issues with past incidents that we cannot get along, we cannot get over, or we cannot move on, and then that festers within us for years together. And although something is not immediately troubling us, the thing from the past is always there and weighing down upon us. So that's the other type of consequence. The third type I had mentioned was we develop strong ideologies and conditionings, and therefore that becomes an issue in trying to adjust or get along with people. So that's another kind of manifestation. And then it also leads to unresolved emotional issues and so on. And then the fourth kind of manifestation is simply that we might not have all the other three. We may not have a problem with people or with past incidents or inflexibility, but we might get caught up in this whole likes and dislikes thing, right? We might go too deep into, say, I want this particular type of house, I want this particular type of furniture, and so on. And that can simply consume our lives. Or it could be something else. Maybe it's clothing, or maybe it's going on vacations, or going or using cars, or anything on the materialistic side. Or it could not be materialism, it could be something else that we develop a strong like for, and it almost becomes an obsession, right? So those kind of obsessive things, even though it might not hurt anybody, it might just take away our time and all that, it has a consequence, right? Every obsession has a consequence. So those are some of the areas in which this whole problem manifests. Once again, as I said, it's related to the Agya Chakra. And then we saw how this can move on to impact more things and more people around us. We are seeing the division in our society today, and especially in the country like America, where the people are so divided, even within the family and politics and so on and so forth. And then once we have these strong opinions and take one side versus the other, then that results in activism, conspiracy theories, at any cost defeat the other side because I'm right, the other side is wrong. The means justify the end. So let me just try and do everything possible to destroy the other side and so on. So it all gets into a crazy muddle, and then life becomes difficult and we are unable to rise. We lose track of what we want in life, which is essentially joy and happiness, and that comes out of simplicity. And we want a life where we are growing and evolving continually, and there is some peace in life. So all that goes away soon. The other problem that it leads to is that in today's world, our likes and dislikes have many opportunities for being amplified, especially over the means of communication, over social media posts. And we are just connected thousands of miles away. We can just talk to somebody, pass on the negativity and negative views and so on, and then that amplifies and so on. That is the additional problem that we face. So it's not just we develop this negativity within us, but the chance of spreading it around is extremely high compared to, say, 50 years ago. Then the other problem is that when we have these resentments and we give in to all these problems, we buy into people who offer us solutions, and that's the problem, right? Now, whether it's some sort of spiritual healer, or it's some sort of politician, or it's some sort of maybe even a quack, a doctor or somebody who says, yeah, I know this is a problem, and who will feed the problem knows that you have a problem, and then they try to either sell their products or they just try to take you onto their side and so on and so forth. So that is also the problem, the weakness, the negativity within us, the inflexibility and so on, the strength of the strong opinions that we have also makes us weak in a way, because we are susceptible to all these kind of attacks. We, in a way, you could say, we lose our independence, our independent sense of thinking, and the power to rise and forgive. In fact, the forgiveness is a weapon, the biggest weapon that we have within us, and we lose that weapon when we give in to this kind of thinking and mentality, right? And then others begin to take control of us, and they begin to offer the option, so much so that we feel that we cannot help ourselves, we are weak, I need somebody to come along and help me, or I need to pay a lot of money to solve this problem. That doesn't have to be. If we are strong enough and if we work on this problem and stay away from it, then we can become stronger and stronger, and then we will still have those options if you want to use any of those solutions. But the point here is that we want to be in total complete control of ourselves. Then, of course, groupism is another problem. So we generally, without our realizing, tend to gravitate towards people who think like us, who agree with us, and we begin to hate people who do not think like us, and so on. And this creates groups in this entire world, divided countries, divided groups, and all sorts of problems. So last week we also discussed that the singular chakra that's problematic if we have any of these issues is the Agya chakra. I just spoke about the ego and the conditionings. The inability to forgive is one of the most important aspects. As I just said, forgiveness is perhaps the biggest boon human beings have, and it's also the biggest weapon that we have. So if we are able to do it, use it often and easily. It's easier said than done, of course. It's not easy to forgive. And many times we do not even know whether we have forgiven or not, right? We think we have forgiven, but it's still there lingering and it's hurting us. But either way, that whole ability to forgive has to be developed, and that inability should not be there. The other thing is the root cause is the strong attachments that we develop. So as I said, we don't have to have a very obvious problem, explicit problem. It could be as simple as we are over attached to something or someone or some aspect, and we are unable to get rid of it. And because we have those chains, it's sort of holding us back from becoming the free spirit. That's also the root cause. And then the last thing to realize is that this is not a one-time problem that can be solved and you can, done and dusted. I can now go and get on with my life. It's a continuous problem that we have to live with as long as we are alive. It's extremely subtle too, and it can creep back into us without us knowing. and it can influence our thinking without us knowing. It can enter our attention. So we need to realize the challenge that we have in the form of this negativity. Be aware that we will always be vulnerable and susceptible to this negativity, and it's extremely subtle. We have to prepare ourselves to be stronger and alert and stay focused. That's what this whole session is about, is how can a person who's meditating develop that independence and that power to introspect and to stay on top of this problem, and then just whack it and say, no, I'm not going to allow that inside. So that's essentially the state that we all want to be in. That's where I believe we stopped last week. So I think I'm going to go back now. Let's start with some meditation before we continue on with the next part two of today's session. All right, so let's try to achieve the state first, the state of meditation. And for this, let's first close our eyes and surrender to this divine power, all pervading power around us. Thank this power for giving us the awareness and the opportunity to pursue spirituality, to solve our problems, for having the desire to become better. And let's take a few moments of silence, respecting, acknowledging this great power around us and completely surrendering to it. And now let's slowly raise our Kundalini energy using the standard technique. If any of you, just in case, do not know, you can simply keep your attention on your Sahasrara. But let's raise our Kundalini energy. Now let's take our attention to the Sahasrara, the crown of the head. Take a few deep breaths. Our hands on our laps, palms facing upward, fingers stretched out, trying to feel the vibrations by virtue of being in the higher state of consciousness. Let's stay alert, watching for any thoughts that come. And if a thought comes, we say, not this thought. Try to let it pass. Now let's slowly open our eyes, and hopefully we were able to experience a few minutes of that thoughtless awareness state. So let's continue on with specific solutions for this problem that we discussed, and then we will do another round of meditation which is more focused to the problem that we are discussing. All right, I'm going to skip through this. All right, so what are the solutions? We have spoken enough about the problem. I'm sure all of us understand what the problems are, how they manifest. Um, I say that the solution is probably divided into three parts. The first thing is what we need to do from a tactical standpoint, day in and day out, every minute of our waking time. Unfortunately, the solution, as I said, has to be comprehensive. It's not like a simple catch. Now, there's always a difference. In Sahaj, there are certain types of problems we can say, oh, this particular chakra is caught up. Let me use a technique. Let me work on it, and then the problem is gone. Maybe soon after we work on ourselves, or maybe within a week, or maximum say within a few days, right? Those are the easy problems. This kind of topic that we are discussing, the problem, is not easy. As I said, it's going to come to us all the time. So we have to develop something more permanent. And so that's what this solution is about. So the first thing that is going to save us to prevent us from getting a clogged and caught up Agya Chakra is constant introspection at the time that we are awake. And so when I say constant introspection during the entire waking time, it has to become an awareness as opposed to an activity. Now, introspection, um, of course, is can be an activity. So when we say let's introspect, right? So that is definitely possible. You can introspect on a particular thing that you usually don't pay attention to. So it can be a verb and it can be an activity. But what I'm talking about here is that developing that whole sense of introspection, it's almost like a radar or some sort of a signaling mechanism which says is some negativity coming into my attention, am I detecting it, right? That is something that we have to work over time, and we can begin with looking inside ourselves, starting this meditation. The more we meditate, but as people who practice meditation, we have to have that awareness, almost like a background process, if you will, running, checking, polling always when we are awake to see if this negativity or conflict or disagreement is entering us and disturbing us, right? That is what is essential each moment that we wake. And so the one easy way of doing that is when we feel uneasiness of any kind, remember that feeling that we get, right? Something isn't right, something is bothering me, right? What does that phrase stand for? That whole bothering, we know that something is not right, something is amiss, right? So the first assumption we make is that that is probably linked to a problem within us. If something is bothering us, let's conclude that it is some inadequacy inside me, right? Make that assumption, and it probably always is, right? Of course, the reason that we are feeling that is because something has happened, maybe something external has happened, or sometimes we have just been thinking a bad thought, or some thought that gives us fear can happen. But very often it can be some external trigger that can happen. And even people who insult us, for example, right? And let's take that example. Somebody says something hurtful to you, immediately it starts bothering you, right? Then in that split second, you know that it's going to hurt you. But the introspection I'm talking about is if in that moment you can understand, oh, I'm getting hurt, right? I know, and I'm getting hurt because I'm probably attached to this person, right? So let me work on this attachment. So the difference here is somebody who doesn't have this introspection will directly have a reaction, right? Oh, how dare you hurt me? How can you say this? And it gets into a fight. As opposed to that, if we, using our meditation techniques, are able to separate ourselves, and that ourselves is actually the spiritual being, watch ourselves and say, oh, I'm getting hurt. I'm getting emotionally attacked or upset, that's because still have an attachment to this person. I need to work on it. That's the difference between the two. And so every situation that is causing some hurtful thing or something that's bothering us ultimately can be traced back to either some sort of an attachment, some sort of more than required involvement, or it could be because of something we are passionate about, or it could be something that we have not forgiven, and so on. You can easily track it down to something where we are not in complete balance, and so we are probably excessively involved or attached or something is the problem, and that's why it is hurting us, right? So that whole source of when that conflict arises, when something negative hits our emotions, having that introspection on and being able to separate ourselves from that and developing that whole witness state, I think is the key introspection that we are talking about. Granted, it's not easy to develop, but the more meditation we do, the more we are able to separate ourselves. We are able to view our own ego and superego, so to speak, right? And that is really the beginning, right? When we are able to see that this is my ego and superego talking, right? Or this is because I am getting hurt because of my attachments. When we are able to make those kind of observations, it means we have succeeded in having the right kind of introspection. And that introspection should be at the background, right, all through our waking time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is working on this problem is a specific situation of conflict, right? I gave the example of how a person might say hurtful things to us, or it can even be something not direct, right? Let's say we are reading some news report and suddenly it triggers fear within us, right? And granted, we have a right to feel scared. We are not perfect human beings and we are not superhuman beings capable of solving everything, right? But that awareness that, okay, I'm having this fear, let me now work on this and let me try to overcome the fear. Let me find solutions. Let me find some reassurance within myself. That is the situation that we want to be in. Or in a more direct conflict, let's say somebody is disagreeing with us right away. We have to find a way to get past that situation. First, observe using our introspection that there is a problem and there is also a solution within us, right? And then in that situation, try to accept, forgive, and detach. That's the core formula over there. And this is relating to each situation when it arises. That introspection rule is always, right? We always want to be detecting whether we have a disturbance deep within us. And if there is a disturbance, it means we need to work on ourselves first. Forget about working about the other person and all that. That doesn't matter, right? That matters, but it comes later. The first thing is to work inside us. And so second is situational, where we try to accept, forgive, and detach. And the third is a long-term approach, right? The long-term approach is more a lifestyle change, where we accept that the only way out for us, for peace, for pursuing the goals we have set for ourselves in our life, is to rise above the problem or the conflict. Now, what does rising above mean? What it means is that, well, there is a literal explanation and there is a the real explanation. The literal meaning of it is that we are stuck at the agya over here. So all our thoughts, everything is muddled, we are fully involved. If we are able to look at our ego and superego and allow the Kundalini energy to pass and our attention can go to the Sahasrara, it's like we are looking down from above onto our ego, superego. Okay, this is my ego, this is my superego, this is my lack of forgiveness, this is my attachment, and so on. That is the literal part of rising above, getting to that Sahasrara. Now, figuratively speaking, the rising above is that we take ourselves, remove ourselves from being the source of the problem, right? We try to become not part of the problem, but part of the solution, right? And we say that, okay, this is a conflict. Why is this conflict happening? And I'm extremely calmly, if we are able to look at the situation and witness it and say, I need to rise above this. Let me find out what is the issue. So many people are impacted. I'm also impacted because I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling hurt or whatever, right? If we look at it and then work on it to say, okay, I'm going to move past this, right? That I'm going to move past this or rise above. That is the key over there, long term key. If we can develop that approach and attitude no matter what, then forgiving becomes easy. And then, if every person in this world did that, then all of these whole conflicts would just come down significantly and drastically, right? Agreed, it's not an easy thing. It requires a lot of maturity, a high degree of emotional intelligence, and all of that. But still, there is a way where we can practice that, make it part of our lifestyle. And maybe in the beginning, it's hard. We are still working on things from the past and so on. But as we do our meditation more and more and more, if we are able to almost make it automatic within us, okay, problem comes, I'm going to rise above, I'm not going to get stuck. It may take some time for me to fix it, but hey, I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to be part of the problem. So, this sort of a whole attitude and mentality has to come within us, and that's the only long term approach that will work. So, this combination of these three approaches, the first thing is the whole introspection mechanism, and all of these come through meditation in somewhat deeper and deeper meditation, no question about that. And the second thing is about situational, right? I want to accept, forgive, detach. And the third thing is, as a general rule, we are looking for not getting involved in conflicts, but at the same time not being aloof or detached, right? When the neighbor's house is burning, you don't want to say, oh, you know what, I am going to rise above this, I don't care, right? No, that's not what we should do. What we should not do is panic, right? And we should be the persons to quickly go out there and try to solve the problem, do something with common sense and try to help, instead of all getting involved and panicking and yelling and crying, right? That's what we are talking about here. So these three approaches in general are important as a framework for getting rid of problems that are related to the Agya Chakra. As I said, be part of the solution, separating ourselves from the problem. Now we go to specific technique sort of solutions, right? Now, the first one and the most important is the use of the earth element. Now, in Sahaj, all our chakras are made up of the nature's five elements: earth, air, water, ether. What we do is, since we are comprised of these elements, then we use specific elements, we touch the essences of these elements, and we use the power of these elements to get rid of specific types of negativity. That's a simple concept. So the earth element in particular is important over here, because the Agya chakra is actually connected to the Muladhara chakra, and it is the same power that runs both. Spiritually, we have these powers within us. What are these powers? These are more like seeds within us planted for us to manifest certain personalities, certain qualities, or make certain achievements. Now, the power that governs the Muladhara chakra, the first chakra, is the same as the power that governs this particular chakra as well. So this is not just out of Sahaj teachings, but also out of experience of a lot of practitioners, is that when we use the Mother Earth, when we use the earth element, we try to get rid of a lot of these complicated problems. And we use the earth element to pass those problems, things like hang-ups, things like issues, people who are troubling us, and anything that's bothering us, all of it, if we use the earth element, and then we try to ward off the negativity by simply giving it away and taking it out of our system, that can be extremely effective when we have these issues of forgiving and conflicts and disagreement. And the way to do this is a special technique that you might not do each day, but I would highly recommend, if you have found problems with your Agya, if you're having all these problems that we said, just discussed, take 15-20 minutes, go outside, sit on the lawn, have both your hands on the grass or lawn or whatever, and then do your meditation. Pay specific attention to the problems that you're facing, right? And surrender those problems to Mother Earth, right? Through affirmations, we say, Mother Earth, I surrender this particular problem to you. Give it a few moments, you surrender it, and you take your attention to the Sahasrara. So the thing that we're doing is the act of transferring and requesting this whole earth element to take away all our problems. And taking away means that by definition, if something is taken away, you don't have it, right? And that's the most important thing. We cannot just say this, it cannot just be words. We sit on the ground and then we say, oh, please take this away, right? If it's truly taken away and we want to give it away, you have to give it away, right? Then we shouldn't be thinking about it. It shouldn't be bothering us, right? So we should keep that in mind, and it will happen over a period of time. It won't happen the first time that we are doing this, but this is an extremely efficient way, where we sit on the ground, have both our hands first on the ground, and we go problem by problem, and then we put our attention on the problem. Then we say some affirmations to the Mother Earth and say, Mother Earth, please take this particular problem away. Wait for a while, take your attention to the Sahasrara and allow it to get released, right? And so on, go after each of the problems. And once you're done going through all the problems, and that identification of the problem will come through your introspection mechanism. And if you have sort of assumed that the root cause of the problem is inside me and I'm trying to solve that, right? If that self-awareness is there. And once we have gone through all the problems, then you can do your regular meditation sitting on the ground. As many times as you can do it, I think can be extremely efficient in getting through all of those, stoppages, all of those blocks, obstacles, whatever we are facing in the Agya Chakra. The next category of a specific solution for the Agya Chakra is again extremely important, is attentional control. And the reason I say that is all negativities enter our attention. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, these whole negative emotions, negative forces, the way they work is they enter our attention and then they influence our thinking and our brains. Many times we may not even realize why we are reacting or thinking in certain ways. They are so subtle that they tend to enter through, they enter into our system, and they capture our attention. So one important way of staying clear of problems and making it easier for us to get over these problems, forgive, etc., is to constantly introspect what we are putting attention on. A very good example is when we wake up first thing in the morning. Yeah, doing meditation is great, but also not reading negative news is even better, right? The two are going hand in hand. So it's not just about meditating and trying to, reinvigorate ourselves and all of that. It is also trying to stay clear of negativity. And once we know that negativity enters through all this media, it puts these thoughts within us, and it has the power to influence us, to take us through these various stages of conflict and ultimately, land us up in problems. We are better off trying to avoid things. Now, obviously, we don't want to go to the extreme. When I say early in the morning, don't read negative news, it only means that prioritize what's important, and it's not good not to know what's going on in this world, but try to use the right sources that do not have bias, for example, and which do not overreact to the problem. Now, one thing about today's media is that they are in the business of trying to sensationalize things, and they will never report that somebody is extremely happy and there is no news to report, right? That's not going to happen. So by definition, for them to stay in business, they are going to have to report something that's extremely amusing or a huge problem or something that evokes a reaction within you, right? So that's how they are set up. So knowing that, we should limit what we put our attention to. Specifically, this particular problem, I said, you could have a balance of what you read, not just the news, but everything else, what views you read. Be extremely choosy. Or maybe there are certain topics that we don't need to know about. Ignorance is bliss, as they say, right? What's going to happen? So what? Some politician went somewhere and did something. Who cares, right? That's not going to, in the scheme of things, change a lot of things, right? So maybe we could be more choosy. We could be more, you could say, prioritizing in our needs for whether we need this information or not. And similar thing, entertainment too, right? Watching what we watch, what we involve ourselves in can cause negativities to come in through our attention. So this way, we find that there are so many things that can actually, come into our attention. And yes, social media is a great thing, right? And maybe we don't need social media at all, right? Maybe just use it for a positive purpose. If you want to spread a great message, or an inspiring message or something positive, may use it for that. we don't need to read everything that's there on social media, right? So in effect, this whole attentional control, what we are during our waking time spending our attention to, is extremely important, because we have to know that negativity is entered through our attention, and then once through our attention they come inside our chakra, inside the agya chakra, settle down there, so much so that they can completely influence our whole thinking and our lives. So that's extremely important, right? Moving on to the next solution that we have is eye control specifically. Now, the reason I put that over here is lot of the negativities actually enter through our eyes. So these negative forces that can cause or feed hatred, anger, make us resort to some sort of violence and all that, all of them come through the eyes. So the recommendation in Sahaj is extremely explicit, is that keep your eyes on good things, keep it on nature, keep it on good people, keep it on small children. In fact, there is even a recommendation that says when you walk on the street, keep your eyes, lower your eyes to the level of 4 feet or 5 feet. When you see that, you will see all the plants, the flowers, and you will see the children smiling, right? When you look up, you look at people who are more complicated, sometimes people who are negative, and so on, right? That's when the problems start. Of course, this is just, figuratively speaking, but the essence is that what we look at and we pay our attention together, right? Attentional control is one thing, but then eyes are extremely important. The other thing that's been a good experience that a lot of people have told me is that yes, negativity enters through the eye, but once it is inside, it begins to control our eyesight to those things that the negativity likes to feed. So it's not just getting in the negativity, but then it begins to control our eyesight. Many people have said my eyes were automatically directed to bad things that I did not want to see. That is the extent of the power that negativity can have within us. And so, if we want to have a clear agya, it's also important that we control our eyes, and our eyes should always be, where are my eyes going, and try to focus it on good things, clear things, things that do not matter, right? Things that are negative, maybe even people that are negative. Of course, we don't want to get too extreme here and turn our eyes away and all that. We obviously have to be friendly and all that. So if we understand the concept, I think it will become clearer and clearer. But right now at this point, I want to make it clear that negativity is entered through the eyes, and so be extremely careful in where our eyesight is going and what we are looking at. That's again an important recommendation. The other thing is, this is searching for humbling experience and moments is something about, we would have heard, problems are relative, right, in their severity and size. Um, you know, for somebody who has a very narrow vision, the food in front of me may not be something that I like, and I might get upset over it, right? And I could have, if I start thinking about thousands of children who are going hungry, who do not have anything to eat, then my problem becomes small relative to that. So that's an example. That is actually a good way to sort of minimize the problems in the agya. See, we feed our problems and we tend to make them worse because we think too much and we think it's a big problem. If we were to expand our vision of life and look at a whole lot more severe problems that people are facing, then our problems either goes away or becomes extremely small, right? So one recommendation is search for those experiences, go outside, look for those situations where people are struggling or the bigger issues in this world, expand our vision so that we don't spend as much time in our agya and we don't think it's a problem, we ignore it and automatically it goes away, right? That's the recommendation over here. That's what I said. Expanding our vision and perspective of the world is extremely important. The more people we meet, the more diverse experiences that we have, helps us trying to get over our own problems, trying to, work on the same thing. And this is particularly common if we are too bothered about problems about our own family, children, and what, right? All those things. If we have a more expansive view, then maybe some of those problems will become smaller. The other part is a surrender. Now, this is again an important concept. After we begin to do our meditation, we know that we are connected to the power, right? And that this power exists, we can feel it in our hands through our vibrations. And if we know that we are connected to this greatest power that runs this universe, right, we should be able to use this power or surrender this problem to the power and allow it to work. But that allowing it to work is a difficult thing, because as human beings we've been brought up to, oh, there is a problem, go jump in and solve it, right? That is a problem, that is a typical reaction that we have been taught. But after doing our meditation and after becoming, a meditator, being connected to all this power, one of the important things is to know when to step back, be laid back, surrender the problem to the divine and allow it to work. And it can actually have amazing results. I personally have tried this many times, struggling with a lot of things. Take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. Let me just surrender, go and take some time off, or maybe even do some meditation and then come back and surrender it to the divine, and it finds the best ever solution for the problem. I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me, and there are so many practitioners who would also say that. So this whole approach of I have to find a solution to every problem and I have to solve it isn't always necessarily correct. And that may also be causing all of these problems at the Agya, because you're too tightly wound up and all that. There can be so many problems that we say, I don't need a solution now, let me meditate over it, let me surrender it to the divine, right? So that's a good approach as well. But not every time. There are times when we have to jump in and solve, right? It's the balance that counts. Then the other solution, this has been highly recommended also, is that if something is a nagging problem, right, and it's always there, then maybe shocking yourself. Now, a problem could be something like, you are obsessed with something. Earlier I had spoken about an obsession, right? It is just occupying so much of your time, and eventually one fine day you realize your life has become extremely complicated, you cannot do without it, and it's all troubling you. Then maybe just take a drastic solution, just get done with it, right? Same thing can apply to people. If there is somebody who's constantly nagging, and you're having conflicts, etc., maybe say, yeah, let's just be done with it, right? We are not able to find any solution, go anywhere, right? Maybe it's a colleague or something, and maybe you just need to change a job. Maybe your problems at work is happening, it's a sign, maybe it's not meant to be. So just try to switch jobs and move away. And I realize that we do that. Many people often find that we don't want it to be a solution to escape from problems rather than solve it. But at times, shocking ourselves into a sudden change, letting go and just releasing it, can do wonders. And there have been excellent examples and stories where people got into an argument, right? They were fighting tooth and nail. Maybe it was a negotiating battle or something like that, right? Then one person suddenly gave up and said, okay, I'm done. You take everything. I don't want, right? And then the other person was so embarrassed that ultimately, they just came back and said, okay, that's fine, let's work it out and everything. So that giving in suddenly, that shocking thing, sometimes can be extremely useful. Maybe we are trying too hard, right, at some points, and maybe the solution is to just, give it a rest and just move away. So those are some of the additional solutions which help us overcome the agya. Still a few more which are even more long term. As I said, making ourselves the focus of the improvement, which is, as I said, the introspection mechanism should always tell us that there is some problem within us. It's the attachment or the ego or the superego or the like or the dislike or something, right? If we trace every disturbance within us to something that's an area of improvement within us, then we will solve this whole problem of this agya chakra. Another recommendation, shun criticism as a rule, right? So anybody, any form, we may love this criticism, we may love somebody making fun of somebody, and that person may be completely justified in doing it, but this whole criticism doesn't lead us to any good, right? So just ignore, even if people come and talk to you and murmuring and saying, oh, this person is not there, complain. Fine, we don't want to offend people, but the simple single rule is that criticism always comes from some sort of negativity, even from extremely good-minded people, good-willing people. But if we have to stay clear in our agya, just shut out criticism, don't read criticism, don't entertain criticism or conversations. That's the recommendation. Once again, something related, don't feed the negativity that fuels the conflict, right? So if somebody is coming, because social media discussion, right, group forum, somebody is complaining and all that, get more and more into it. Stopping and breaking that chain is always what's recommended, right? And even if somebody is coming to you and saying, okay, let's have a chat, this is a problem, oh, what shall I do, try, while we can discuss constructive solutions, if it becomes just feeding more and more of the negativity, just cut it, right? That's going to be good for the person, good for everybody around. And the other thing is this groupism related thing. So we shouldn't influence people with our agyas. We may have some issues and likes and dislikes. I don't think we should pass on whatever is our likes and dislikes to anybody, including our children, family members, and friends. Not strongly enough. If it is genuinely bad for them, yes, that's good. But I think that even in situations of conflict, we should allow people to be the judge of their own, whatever, their own judge, and evaluate it their way. And so the reason that this recommendation is given is we want to stay clear, we want to keep our agya clean. We also don't want to influence or dominate or force our opinions on people, right? So we should allow them to be their own judge. And finally, social media, we have said, I've said enough, so that's definitely a recommendation. The less social media we have, the better. All right, I guess that's pretty much the end of the list of solutions. So let's have a quick meditation. Hopefully, all of the solutions were useful. And let me now just focus on the next few minutes on the specific technique about the Mother Earth, how you would do it at home, right? So let's close our eyes. And when we are doing this at home, imagine that you're sitting on the ground comfortably. Let's take both our hands, place it by our side, and if you're sitting on the ground, both our hands should be touching the Mother Earth. Mother Earth, please absorb all my negativity, all my problems. Make me innocent and detached. Now let's take one problem that any of us might have silently that's bothering us. Offer it to Mother Earth. Mother Earth, please absorb this negativity and the problem caused by this negativity. I surrender it onto you. Please help me detach. And now let's take our attention to the Sahasrara. And in doing this, we should not be thinking about the problem that we just asked Mother Earth to solve. We should try to be in that state of thoughtless awareness, not worrying or thinking about the problem. Forgive and rise above the problem. Now we can take both our hands back on our laps. Continue to keep our attention on the Sahasrara chakra. Now let's take a deep breath, slowly open our eyes, and we will raise our Kundalini energy to conclude the meditation.